NFL draft season is officially upon us as we are just under about a month and a half away before we watch rookies join their new NFL teams. Excitement is in the air. Previews are starting to roll out, and I am beginning mine today with none other than the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have made a ton of noise in free agency with just a few select moves. So today, we'll talk a little bit about those moves. We'll dive into a draft preview here. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get right to it.
You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Hristodoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and as I said, today I am kicking off my draft previews with none other than the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that's made a significant amount of noise through free agency with just a few specific moves that I think could be game changers for this team going into 2024. So we're going to take a look at that really quickly, and then we'll dive in to draft positions, players that I would like to see and or anticipate the Steelers to go after in this upcoming NFL draft. So I invite you all to do the same in the comments section down below. Let me hear your thoughts and opinions on the Pittsburgh Steelers free agency and or potential draft moves that they could be making come the end of April. And just as a reminder, I recently partnered with NFL Shop and Fanatics. If you plan on buying any sort of sports apparel in general, feel free to use my links both in the description or this QR code over my shoulder here. It'll help out the show and in turn potentially earn me a discount code I can pass on to you guys. But with that being said, diving right in, we'll start first with the free agency review. As I mentioned, I want to go over this briefly here because I think it kind of molds what we're looking at as far as the draft goes itself. If you're not really looking for this, feel free to skip forward. I got chapters here, makes it very easy for you to get to what you're really looking for. But starting with free agency, quarterback Russell Wilson signing a $1.2 million deal, then going out and trading for Bears quarterback Justin Fields for just a conditional 6th-round pick. On top of that, you go and sign linebacker Patrick Queen to a 3-year, $41 million deal. Dante Jackson, you go after him from the Panthers in a trade. On top of that, you sign a 2-year deal with Deshaun Elliott, and you also keep Christian Kuntz as well. So overall, not the biggest in terms of amount of moves made in free agency, but a significant free agency nonetheless. The quarterback room is completely different from 2023, and I think a lot of people would argue in a upgraded fashion. Pretty exciting stuff there. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this all shakes out, whether it winds up being Russell Wilson or if Justin Fields maybe gets to buy his time a little bit. Things don't work out with Russell and then he gets to jump in and maybe becomes a difference maker for the offense there in Pittsburgh. There is a lot to be intrigued about there. But the big signings or just moves in general for me have got to be the addition of linebacker Patrick Queen, and on top of that, getting at cornerback Dante Jackson. Patrick Queen immediately addresses what has been a position of need somewhat for the last, I would say, handful of years, basically since Pittsburgh lost Ryan Shazier to a career-ending injury. I feel like it's been very up and down, where it was very mixed results, but I would say more so recently, like a couple of years ago, wasn't necessarily great. I think this year you got a better performance than anyone really anticipated from the group, but adding Patrick Queen really solidifies the middle of your defense there and is a huge signing. And then Dante Jackson and even Deshaun Elliott can be thrown into this as well. You have two veteran guys who've been really good over the duration of their career, especially Dante Jackson. This is a guy that I've been very high on for quite some time, so to see him coming in to help fortify a secondary that could use a little bit of help here. Obviously, the front seven over there in Pittsburgh is as vicious as they come, but seeing them go after a guy like Dante Jackson after losing Levi Wallace, I think this is going to be a very exciting defense to watch this next year. And I think all these moves really go hand in hand because the defense in Pittsburgh has been great, but offensively, the quarterback situation, and even schematically, has not necessarily been great. I've heard you Matt Canada people for quite some time now, so I know you all are looking forward to basically a clean slate going into this next season here. New quarterback room, new offensive coordinator. An entire kind of refresh for the offense is definitely one that I think was necessary. Now, beyond the free agency stuff, we're going to dive in now to the draft itself. Like I said, I've got 3 positions that I'm looking at here, 3 players in specific that I'm going to talk about here. I'm not doing a full-blown round-by-round, pick-by-pick draft for the Pittsburgh Steelers because I'm going to try to crank out as many teams as possible before the NFL draft actually happens. So the first one, we'll start with the most pressing in my opinion, and this is one that needs to get addressed here. Offensive tackle. You need someone to be playing opposite of Broderick Jones, who you drafted last year. The draft is very deep at wide receiver, and you have George Pickens, and I understand, yes, you just traded away Deontay Johnson, so that is something that is going to be in the back of your mind going into this draft class here. However, there are some other things, and we'll talk about that because I do plan on discussing wide receiver a little bit later, that you can kind of look at in terms of that position here. I think you really need to look at tackle, specifically a left tackle at that. According to PFF, Dan Moore was credited for 8 sacks allowed in 2023, which is a big no-no on the blind side for your quarterback, and with new quarterbacks coming in, you want to make this transition as smooth as possible. Broderick Jones has experience playing both left and right tackle, but I do think that there was a clear commitment to have him play on the right side, so continuing that path and continuing that progression going forward might be the ideal situation. That being said, as far as what you do on the left side, and I think this could be a phenomenal grab that should potentially be there. You may or may not have to move up a couple of spots, and I do think the Steelers have some extra capital to maybe jump up a couple of spots if they feel necessary, if there's a run on offensive tackles prior to them. But that's going to be getting left tackle Troy Fautanu. I think that this would be a monumental draft choice for the Steelers going forward and help solidify the left side of that offensive line. PFF has him credited for only 2 sacks spanning from 2022 to 2023, and on top of that, when you go back to what we saw from him at the NFL Combine, the guy is 6'4", 317 pounds. This is a big dude, but he showed excellent athleticism. He was one of the guys that really stood out to me during the drills. I'm not talking like, I don't care about, the shuttle or the 40-yard dash, things like that. No, I'm talking like some of those skill drills where you're really getting to see these guys move in space and just how do they operate. He was one of the cleanest and smoothest offensive tackles, in my opinion. I even tweeted out about him as well because it was just so impressive to watch this guy move at such a massive size. I think athleticism combined with his ability on the left side of the O-line should be an excellent addition to a unit that has been progressing over the last couple of years, and he is a guy that can really help take this offensive line to the next level. So I really like the idea of going to get Troy Fautanu here. The second position we're going to look at here, as I briefly alluded to before, trying to justify my first pick here, this is one that you can target in day 2, in my opinion, and that's going to be wide receiver. With picks at number 51, 84, and 98, you have a little bit of ammo to work with, coupled with some later picks during day 3 of the draft, if you'd opt to maybe use some of those to package a deal and maybe move up if you feel necessary. But you do have a good amount of picks and some valuable ones at that to work with here in day 2. And this is where I think the Steelers are probably going to go get the compliment to George Pickens, because he is your number 1, and I do think he wants to be treated as such. That is something that I think has been very clear over the duration of his career to this point. On top of that, there's been a lot of conversation and speculation about Tyler Boyd potentially jumping over from Cincinnati and heading over into the Pittsburgh Steelers area. I will say that with Boyd being a perennial slot guy and one of the best over the duration of his career, one of those people that just never quite got the recognition, because I think Boyd's just, he's not loud. He's not one of those super flashy guys, but he is a guy that over the middle is always available, always able to make a catch, always able to make a big play. I mean, this goes back to like the AJ Green days when he was still in Cincinnati. So Boyd's been as good as they come in the slot for quite some time. You bring him in, that solidifies your wide receiver working over the middle. You have Pickens, who is very comfortable playing both the X and Z receiver position. You can go into the draft, find a guy who can play opposite of him, and on top of that, with Pickens' willingness to play both sides, he doesn't really care. He's made that clear himself as well. He just wants opportunities to go get the football. I like the idea in the second, maybe third round, depending on where things kind of shake out, chasing after a guy like wide receiver Devontae Walker from UNC. This could be a very fun addition to the offense and pairing with George Pickens. At 6'2", 193 pounds, good size, good meat on his bones. He has a 4.36 40-yard dash, so he is a burner. He showed excellent explosiveness with his legs with a 40.5-inch vertical. He had 11'2" broad jump, and if any of you nerds out there know what I'm talking about here, he had a 9.91 out of a possible 10 on the relative athletic score. This guy is explosive. He has really good size. And again, somebody who played outside, who you can make work opposite of wherever you're lining up George Pickens to create those mismatches against defenses here. And I've got to say, when you look at his body of work through his collegiate career, it translates to the field as well. You're talking 1,600 yards over the last couple of seasons, 18 touchdowns, and a 16-yard per reception average. His size and speed combination and playmaking ability, that needs to be thrown in there as well, should be a huge addition here. And like I said, this is all about finding a complement for Pickens. He is clearly your number one wide receiver. When you are feeding him the football, magic happens for this offense. You need to find a complement, not someone that's going to try to overtake him as number one. Let's get a guy that helps get George Pickens open, who can be a threat, but Pickens can be the guy, because he is someone that has just not gotten as many targets as I would like to see for somebody with the talent that he has. I want to see his ability maximized. You've got to get a guy opposite of him that can help open things up for him, maybe force some attention to go the other way to really allow him to take advantage of mismatches. And then the final player position that I have targeted here, my third one of the video, we're going to talk O-line again, but this time we're going to go interior, and I'm talking right in the very middle of that offensive line. And we're looking at center. This is also something I think you could address in day 2. You may have to make this selection before taking Walker, but I do think it is very possible for you to work this out. Like I said, you got 3 picks during day 2 of the draft, so you have some ammunition to move yourself around here. And I really don't think the Steelers are that far off from being a competitive playoff team. I think there's a few positions that need addressing, but you hit the right pieces, and this is a legit contender in the AFC North. And with that, looking at center, I like at 6'3", 313 pounds, Nick Frazier from West Virginia. Mason Cole was your starter last year. Wasn't necessarily the most threatening at the position, and to be honest, I do think it's time for an upgrade. He's still sitting on the free agent market, and with some of the money that was handed out, or just money that you're allotting now for some of the players you brought in here, especially when you look at like Dante Jackson and Patrick Queen, I don't know if re-signing him is going to be a very realistic possibility, and I think going rookie at the position might not be a bad idea, especially bringing in new quarterbacks. You can kind of just reset the position there and make them work together to find their cohesion. So with that, like I said, at 6'3", 313 pounds. This guy was credited for 0 sacks this past season and 3 sacks in 2022. He's considered by many a top 3 center in the draft. You might even say top 2 on top of that. He's praised by scouts for his explosiveness out of his stance. He is a supreme run blocker. And on top of that, he brings positional versatility. He's both a center and a guard during his playing time in college. So if you need to move him around for whatever the issue may be, maybe things are just not working out at center, and again, that's worst case scenario. You can plug him in on the guard side of things, whether it's right or left, and maybe work something out from there. You can always play around with his position because he has time spent at both areas. So while he might not be the most athletic guy in the world, his measurements are not going to blow you away. He's a little bit more of a compact person as far as centers are concerned. I think continuing to build out the offensive line and solidifying that center position, which is a position that for whatever reason gets overlooked a lot, but is one of the most crucial positions. They are the deciding factor every single play, especially when it comes to shotgun plays, whether this play goes off without a hitch at the very beginning, or if you're looking at a ball flying over your quarterback's head 20, 30 yards and he's chasing it down, and the entire play, potentially your entire drive, is blown up at that point. This is one of those things where it's a cheap way to address a very important position and potentially upgrade the position at that, because I don't quite think that Mason Cole was enough for this offensive line. So it would be in the Steelers' best interest, in my opinion, to go ahead and target, if not Nick Frazier, a starting center in this draft class, and I would go early to try to get one of the better ones on top of that. But that's kind of how I'm looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers for the draft this year. Again, Steelers fans, let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts and opinions, what you would like to see from them, your thoughts on how free agency has gone for them so far. Did the Deontay Johnson trade shock you by any means? Because that definitely shocked me as well. But that is it for me. As always, greatly appreciate you taking your time to hang out. That's it for me. Have a good one.